The briefing hall of the Galactic Coalition Military Academy smelled of recycled air and quiet dread. It was a scent Commander Kale Veyron had come to appreciate over his 43 years of instructing. Fear, properly administered, was a teaching tool. It sharpened minds. It sorted the cadets who would survive from those who would not. And today's lesson was specifically designed to break something loose inside every young officer seated in those tiered rows, a reckoning with the true cost of interstellar warfare. "Lights," Commander Kale Veyron said. The chamber dimmed. Holographic projectors hummed to life. What filled the space above them was not simulation. It was archive footage, stamped with coalition authenticity seals, pulled from the Viridian conflict, a border skirmish from 6 years ago that had killed approximately 400,000 soldiers across 12 species. The kind of battle that did not make recruitment posters. Kale watched the cadets as the footage played. He had seen it himself 41 times. He no longer flinched. But he watched them flinch, the Lorathi cadets whose bioluminescent skin flickered with distress signals, the Ethan cadet whose wings pressed flat against his back, the twin Christian brothers who reached instinctively for each other's arms. This was the point. Witness the horror. Metabolize it. Become something capable of functioning inside it. The footage showed a coalition defensive line collapsing under pulse artillery. It showed the retreat. It showed the field hospital recordings. It showed what happened when the hospital was shelled. Kale let it run for 11 minutes. Then he said, "Pause." The image froze on a crater field. Bodies visible at the edges of the frame. A banner still burning. "This is what you signed for," he said, walking the central aisle. "Not glory. Not songs. This." Questions? Silence. Good. Silence meant they were processing. Then, from the back row, seat 7, tier 4, a hand rose. Cadet Lyra Vera. Human. Death World Registry, Earth origin. She had been one of only 3 humans admitted to this cohort, which was itself an ongoing experiment the Coalition's sociological division had quietly greenlit after years of debate. Humans were an anomaly, too fragile by mass, too short-lived by galactic standards, too limited in most measurable physical categories to justify their combat record. And yet, the record existed. "Cadet Vera," Kale said. "Sir." She stood. Regulation posture. Calm face. "I have a question about the footage." "Ask." "At timestamp 6:14, can you rewind to that?" Kale's jaw tightened slightly. Cadets did not direct the lecture. But something in her tone was not insubordinate, it was precise. The tone of someone who had noticed a thing and wanted to name it clearly. He had been doing this long enough to know the difference. "Display timestamp 6:14, he said. The footage rewound. The image sharpened on a section of the collapsed defensive line, smoke, rubble, a section of coalition soldiers in full retreat. 3 Ethan. 1 Crucian. 2 Lorathi. And in the far left corner of the frame, almost cut off entirely, a single figure moving in the opposite direction. Toward the enemy line. "That," Lyra Vera said. "Who is that?" The hall was quiet. Kale looked at the frame. He had watched this footage 41 times. He had never noticed that figure. It was barely visible, occluded by smoke, at the edge of the sensor range, identified by nothing more than movement direction and approximate body shape. "Enhance section delta left," he said. The image processors worked. The figure resolved, slowly, imperfectly, but enough. Human. Unmistakably human in silhouette. Light infantry kit. No heavy weapons. Moving at a low run toward an artillery position that was, at this moment in the footage, actively firing on the retreating coalition forces. "Archive, identify personnel at timestamp 6:14, section delta left," Kale ordered. The archive system chimed softly. Cadet class, this record was sealed under Valor Protocol by Coalition High Command. Authorization required for full identity disclosure. Partial record indicates human combatant, 3rd Forward Infantry, designation, volunteer. Volunteer. Not conscripted. Not assigned. Volunteered for 3rd Forward Infantry, which was a designation that every officer in this room recognized as the unit tasked with breach operations, the first ones through the door. The ones who absorbed the first volleys so that subsequent forces could operate in a briefly softened environment. Kale looked at the figure on the screen. A single human, without air support, without heavy armor, alone at the edge of sensor range, running toward an artillery cannon that was currently shelling a hospital. Continue footage, Lyra said quietly. Kale played it. 47 seconds later, the artillery cannon stopped firing. There was no dramatic explosion. No signal flare. No confirmation burst. The cannon simply went quiet. And the human figure, the archive could not track them after the smoke thickened, did not reappear on any subsequent sensor log from that engagement. The Valor Protocol seal, Kale now understood, was not for the mission outcome. It was for the identity. Because whoever this was, they had apparently requested anonymity. Or their family had. Or some commanding officer who understood that humans, in general, were poorly served by becoming symbols. The hall stayed silent. Then one of the Lorathi cadets of Fane, top of the tactical reasoning cohort, said slowly, the cannon stopped firing for 6 minutes. Long enough for the medical evacuation to complete. Yes, Lyra said. She sat back down. That's what I noticed. Kale Veyron stood at the front of the room and looked at the frozen frame, the empty position where the artillery cannon had been, the retreating line that had made it, the field hospital still visible in the mid-distance, and understood that his lesson had just been taught by someone else. He had brought them here to learn the shape of fear. The footage had shown them something different. He walked back to the front. Clasped his hands behind his back in the very standing posture that his species used when they needed a moment to recalibrate. Then he turned and faced 400 cadets of 12 species. What Cadet Vera has identified, he said slowly, is a data point that Coalition military analysts have been quietly studying for 3 decades. The human combat record contains approximately 412 documented instances of what has been internally classified as anomalous engagement behavior. Charging rather than retreating. Protecting rather than self-preserving. Holding rather than withdrawing. He paused. In approximately 73% of those instances, the engagement produced a measurable positive outcome for nearby Allied units. He let that settle. Humans, he continued, evolved on a planet that actively tried to kill them. For 4 million years. Their prey was larger. Their predators were faster. Their climate was unstable. Their planet had active geological volatility that periodically reset entire ecosystems. He looked at Lyra Vera, who was watching him with an expression he could not fully read. In the face of all of that, they built cities. They crossed their own oceans in boats made of wood. They did not develop redundant organ systems or toxic secretions or rapid cellular regeneration. They developed cooperation and stubbornness and what their own psychologists call a tend-and-defend response, a physiological shift under extreme stress that, unlike most species, moves them toward endangered members of their group rather than away. Another silence. The individual in this footage will not be identified today, Kale said. Coalition High Command's Valor Protocol exists, among other reasons, because the beings it protects are typically not finished. They tend to continue. He looked at the frame one more time. But I want you to understand what you are looking at. This footage was selected to demonstrate the cost of war. That is still true. But you have also just watched one of the most statistically improbable behaviors in documented galactic military history, a member of a species that should, by every measurable physical metric, be categorized as a non-combat auxiliary, making an unsupported assault on an active artillery position because there was a hospital in its line of fire. He turned off the display. The hall lights came back up. "Dismissed for the day," Commander Cale Veyron said. "Think about what you are willing to move toward." The cadets filed out in groups, murmuring, some quiet, some visibly shaken in new directions than the ones he had planned. The Lorathi were talking in low tones with their bioluminescence cycling through the colors that indicated sustained thought. The Ethan was already writing something in his notation pad. Lyra Vera was the last to leave. At the door, she paused. "Sir," she said. "Cadet. I didn't notice it first because I'm human." She looked at him steadily. "I noticed it because it was moving the wrong direction. That's the only thing I saw." She left. Cale Veyron stood alone in the briefing hall and looked at the blank space where the footage had been. Moving the wrong direction. He had been teaching for 43 years. He had reviewed this footage 41 times. On the 42nd, a human cadet in the back row had looked at a figure running toward an active artillery cannon, alone, through smoke, with no backup. And had simply asked, "Who is that?" He did not have a good answer. He suspected no one did. He suspected that was, somehow, the entire point.